Hey everyone, a very important question today about autism and how it fits in what we're talking about. Hi Claire, what about autism? I am autistic, in inverted commas, is an identification of the self as something other than what we really are. Yes, yes, and we'll look at why. But to simply say it's therefore untrue feels like a denial stroke spiritual bypass. Yes, it does. And are the challenges this particular diagnosis presents with, are they still gifts that are portals to healing? Yes. I saw this quote, late diagnosis means grieving all the time spent trying to fix parts of you that never needed fixing. How does that fit with what you're teaching? Yes, brilliant. These sorts of questions are so important because they force us into the real world, don't they? I mean, I've been on retreats where I've asked about the brain and about different developmental tendencies or aspects, and the response has been there is no brain. That's it. There is no brain. And I cannot see that as anything other than bypass, because the form, the mind body is the form in which that realization of no brain is taking place. So the enlightenment, the realization that came to that teacher, the falling away of what's not true, the unveiling of the essential oneness of life, can only happen in the form. It needs a form for any experience, whether that experience is of an identified, defensive, depressed, anxious, lost individual, or whether it's an experience of the bliss and totality of life itself. It needs the form. And so to dismiss questions like this with there's no such thing as autism, there's no such thing as the brain, there's no such thing as the person, there's no such thing as the world, is such a cop-out. And so let's not do it. And let's instead really look at what this question is about. It's about, I think it's about two things. It's about what we are, really, isn't it? What we are, and how and the relationship between the truth, the unchanging truth of what we are, the truth of what we are, which is before all form, the relationship between that and the way the form appears, restrictions on the form, capacities, disabilities, potentials, resources. And then the second area I think it brings us into is are there brain features and structures and tendencies and ways of thinking, ways of reacting, ways of behaving, ways of seeing that actually make it easier or more difficult to come back into the truth of what we are? And both are so interesting for us to consider. So let's first of all look at that relationship between ourselves and the inner landscape, the sort of psychic phenomena of thought and reaction and emotional state, mind state. Because so as the listener says, when we say I am autistic, total identification in that, isn't it? I am autistic. I am the brain. I am the way of seeing. I am everything that the definition of autistic implies to me. That's what I am. And so in that, the whole experience of being is contained within this definition, within this concept of autism. And that's what we are. And it could be the same. I'm a genius. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm bipolar. I'm dyslexic. Whatever. That's what I am. And when that identification is happening, the autism, or whatever label we have, becomes us. So the only stability in our life, the security in our life, the identity is found within that label, isn't it? Because that's what I am. It's the same as I'm Welsh, I'm a mother, I'm a woman, I'm a 52-year-old. That's what I am. And so the stability of my life is found in that definition. So the irony here is that we might be trying to find freedom from it. If I'm saying I'm depressed, say, I want to try and not be depressed because I'm suffering within it. But actually, when it's part of my identity, I have to keep coming back to it because that's the stability in it. That's the description of me. That's where I exist, is in that. And I think what our conversation does is it starts to loosen up that tightness of identification between existence, between life, between intelligence, between consciousness, and the content of experience, the behaviors, the ways of reacting, the tendencies, the preferences. Because what it starts to become obvious is that the truth of what we are, intelligence, aliveness, beingness, is localized is experiencing a world of form through this localization in a perception created form. The form has no objective truth to it. It can only be experienced through interpretation, through the mind, through conditioning, through beliefs, through association. So the truth of what we are is free of interpretation. It cannot be. It's immune, like life, consciousness. Like it's before all labels, really, before all meaning. And yet, then there's the experience, the content of the experience, which is 100% dependent on belief and meaning and interpretation. And so what, in this conversation, we're seeing a difference now. When we're not the content, cannot be that we're the content, in the same way that we're not the weather. The content is changing all the time, and it's highly, totally dependent on the lens through which it's seen. And so what I think happens, the true freedom in this, and it's why the bypass is such a waste, really, because these questions allow for such richness of truth and lived experience, is that there starts to be this recognition of intelligence in action that is shaped from moment to moment, constrained or opened up by whatever is going on in that moment, experientially, in terms of the in terms of the momentary makeup of the body mind. And that, you know, tired, hungry, defensive, protective, happy, sad, these things totally shape the experience of life. And it's no different from the various mental labels or sort of mind-body labels that we have. It's a momentary contextual constraint, we could say, that in that freedom of seeing, it's not me, that's not what I am, it's just in this moment a frame, creative constraint, my friend Tatiana calls these things, in the same way that if we're an artist, if we're painting on a canvas or we're creating a sculpture out of clay, we're creating a tapestry, it's the same thing. It's just in that moment, this is what's available to work with. It's not me. It's just a momentary context. And the more clearly that's seen, the less that context is overloaded with belief and opinion and fear and insecurity and shame, need. It just becomes more and more refined, more and more specific, more and more real. The whole system starts to get sane in relation to this momentary contextual frame. And I think that is the secret to mental health. That can be the understanding that we have of everything, from the most mild symptoms right through to, you know, to severe schizophrenia, say. It's all on a line of what the constraint currently is. And when the constraint is understood really for what it is, and the basis of it really is the understanding that nothing the mind creates is real. The mind is an incredible imaginative tool. None of it is real in that sense. That's the start of sanity. Yeah. So it's a brilliant question. And then the second question that we were looking at is, are there makeups of mind body that make it more or less difficult for the truth to be realized? It's a good question, isn't it? And I think it's a life work really to investigate that. I think where it's ironically hardest and easiest at the same time is where the system reaches the ultimate space of confusion. Because in that moment, and there's so many teachers that have gone there whose life has been so filled with depression and shame and anxiety and horror, and so many teachers have said it, well, it's either kill myself or do something different, or in that moment of everything, like rock bottom, where there's nothing and yet there's still aliveness, there's still a body being breathed and moved, that realization, nothing is true, none of this is true. I think it's something for us to keep looking at. But I think the key to all of it really is in that, in the relationship with the mind, with the experience, with the content, with the constraints, with the limitation. It's in that clearness of relationship that allows what's not true to fall away, and then what remains, in the case of autism, say, is intelligence in action, doing what makes sense to do with what's available. That's it, and that is sanity, and that's the ultimate in our potential, really, isn't it? Yeah. So it's a brilliant question. Thank you, darling. Lots of love. Bye.